It took Dr. Elias Thorne 30 years of 80-hour weeks to build a net worth of $6.2 million. It took a vacation to the Philippines less than 2 years to tear it apart. In the operating room, Elias was a god, rebuilding shattered spines and replacing hips for Fortune 500 CEOs. He was a man of absolute precision. But this is the story of the one surgery he botched. His own marriage between a 26-year-old Filipina. And the hemorrhage didn't cost him blood. It cost him nearly $2 million. At 57, Elias Thorne was a statistical triumph. His net worth was a fortress, a $1.8 million penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds worth $3.5 million, and a 401k that he had been maxing out since 1995. On paper, Elias was the envy of every man in his tax bracket. But paper doesn't talk back when you come home at 10 p.m. Paper doesn't ask how your day was. Elias suffered from a condition common among high-earning men of a certain generation. He had forgotten to build a life outside of his career. He had a daughter, Maya, now 16, but Maya was the result of a brief, passionate mistake in his late 30s, a relationship that ended before the first trimester was over. Elias had done the honorable thing financially. He paid the child support, funded the private schools, and set up the trust fund. But because of his 80-hour work weeks, Maya had been raised primarily by her grandparents in Wisconsin. To her, Elias wasn't a father. He was an ATM machine that visited on holidays. Now pushing 60, the silence in his penthouse was becoming deafening. He wanted companionship. He wanted someone to share the wealth he had spent 3 decades accumulating. But dating in Chicago was a minefield. The women his age were often bitter from their own divorces or looking for a nurse with a checkbook. The younger women, well, Elias was too proud to be a sugar daddy. He wanted something that felt real, or at least a convincing illusion of it. One Saturday afternoon, Elias was hanging out with his friend Gary, a retired real estate developer, a man who had been divorced 3 times and now spent 6 months of the year living out of a suitcase in Southeast Asia. Gary said, "You're dying in the cold, Eli. Look at you. You're pale, you're stressed, and you're rich. That's a bad combination in America. You need to go where the weather is warm and the people actually smile. Go to the Philippines. Just for a month. Cool off. Trust me, a man like you, you're royalty over there." Elias resisted at first. He wasn't a tourist. He wasn't a sex tourist. But the seed was planted. And after a particularly grueling month at the hospital, 4 emergency surgeries and a malpractice suit he had to settle, Elias booked a first-class ticket to Manila. He told himself it was just a vacation. He had no idea he was flying toward his own dissection. Manila hit him like a fever dream. The humidity, the noise, the relentless energy. It was the polar opposite of his sterile operating room. He stayed at the Shangri-La in Makati, a fortress of luxury amidst the chaos. For the first week, he did what tourists do. He visited Intramuros, he took a day trip to Tagaytay, he sat by the hotel pool. But the loneliness traveled with him. On his 8th night, Gary's advice echoed in his head. Go out, live a little. Elias went to a high-end lounge in Bonifacio Global City. It wasn't a seedy bar. This was where the politicians, the expats, and the wealthy locals mingled. He ordered a Macallan 18, neat. He wasn't looking for anyone, but he was being watched. Her name was Rhea. She was 26 years old, with skin the color of coffee with milk, and eyes that seemed to hold a deep, fabricated innocence. She wasn't working the bar in the traditional sense. She was playing a longer game. Rhea was what the locals might call a freelancer, but she operated at the executive level. She spotted Elias the moment he walked in. She noted the Patek Philippe on his wrist, $45,000. She noted the shoes, Italian leather. She noted the posture, the slump of a man who was successful but tired. To Elias, she was a beautiful woman. To Rhea, he was a balance sheet waiting to be liquidated. The approach was surgical. She didn't offer him a drink. She didn't touch him. She simply stood next to him at the bar waiting for a cocktail and sighed, checking her phone with a look of distress. Elias, being a man whose entire career was based on fixing things, took the bait. "Everything all right?" he asked. Rhea looked up, startled, then offered a shy, embarrassed smile. "Oh, I'm sorry, just my friends bailed on me. It's a bit awkward standing here alone. They talked for 3 hours. She spoke perfect English. She told him she was a marketing assistant for a tech startup in Cebu, visiting Manila for a conference. She lied with the ease of someone breathing air. She asked him about his work, listening with wide-eyed fascination as he described hip replacements and spinal fusions. For a man who hadn't felt heard in a decade, her attention was intoxicating. He paid for her drinks. She insisted on paying for the last round, a calculated investment of $20 that would yield a return of millions. She didn't go home with him that night. She knew better. When you're catching a whale, you don't yank the line on the first nibble. You let him run. They exchanged numbers on WhatsApp. For the next 2 weeks, Elias's vacation transformed. He wasn't exploring the Philippines. He was exploring Rhea. She was vibrant, funny, and seemingly utterly devoted to him. She took him to local spots he never would have found. She held his hand as they walked through the humid streets. She made him feel 30 again. It wasn't until the 3rd week that she came to his hotel room. And when she did, it wasn't transactional. Or at least she made sure it didn't feel that way. She cried a little afterward, telling him she hadn't felt this safe with a man in years. It was the perfect line. It triggered Elias's protector instinct. He wasn't just a lover, he was her savior. Rhea spent 4 nights a week at his hotel. When she wasn't there, she was texting him. "Good morning, handsome. Have you eaten? I miss your voice." The dopamine hits were constant. Elias stopped checking his email. He stopped thinking about the hospital. For the first time in 20 years, he was happy. But while Elias was falling in love, Rhea was working. Every time she left his hotel room, she wasn't going to a marketing job. She was going back to a shared apartment in Quezon City, reporting to her own circle of friends, other women who played the same game. She told them about the watch, the credit limit, the way he never looked at the bill. To them, Elias wasn't a boyfriend. He was a project, a client with a capital C. The vacation had to end. Elias had patients waiting in Chicago. Standing at Ninoy Aquino International Airport, watching Rhea wipe tears from her eyes, Elias felt a pang of panic. He didn't want to go back to the silence. "I'll be back," he promised, holding her face, "and we'll talk every day." "Promise?" she whispered, looking up at him. "I promise." As his plane climbed over the Pacific, heading back to the cold reality of the U.S., Elias felt like he had left his heart in Manila. He didn't know that he had actually just left his common sense there. The hook was set. Now Rhea just had to reel him in. Chicago didn't just feel cold when Elias returned. It felt dead. The silence of his $1.8 million penthouse wasn't peaceful anymore. It was oppressive. For the first time in his career, Elias found himself watching the clock during surgery, not to track the procedure time, but to calculate the time difference. Manila is 13 hours ahead. When Elias was scrubbing in at 7 a.m., Rhea was winding down her day. When he was pouring a glass of wine at nearly midnight, she was just waking up. His phone became his lifeline. It sat on his bedside table, his desk, his dashboard. That small vibration was the only thing that made his heart rate spike. For 6 months, their relationship existed entirely in the digital ether. WhatsApp calls, FaceTime dates, long text threads filled with emojis and promises. To Elias, this was romance in its purest form. Without the physical distraction, he felt they were connecting on a soul level. She listened to his rants about hospital administration. She sent him photos of her cooking dinner, simple meals that made her seem humble, grounded, domestic. He didn't know that the photos were often staged or sometimes lifted from Pinterest. He didn't know that when they video chatted, she positioned herself in the corner of her room that looked the tidiest, hiding the clutter of a lifestyle she couldn't actually afford. To Elias, she was a sweet, struggling girl trying to make it in a tough city. To Rhea, Elias was a job, a high-paying remote consultancy position that required very little actual labor. While Elias was turning down dinner invitations from colleagues to rush home for a scheduled video call, Rhea was living a very different reality. She treated Elias's designated call times like shift work. She would be out at a club in BGC with friends, drinking bottle service vodka paid for by another suitor, checking her watch. "I have to go," she'd tell her friends, rolling her eyes. "The American is calling." She'd step outside into a quiet alley or duck into a restroom, fix her hair, put on a sweet smile, and answer the video call. "Hi, baby. I miss you so much. I was just reading a book and thinking about you. Elias, sitting alone in his high-rise, exhausted and lonely, believed every word. He felt needed. He started sending money. Not because she asked. She was too smart for that. She played the game of pride. She would mention a problem. My laptop broke and I can't work. Or, my grandma's medication is so expensive this month. And then she would sigh and say, but I'll figure it out. I'll work extra shifts. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Elias, the provider, the fixer, would insist. Let me handle it, Rhea, please. It makes me happy to help you. She would refuse once, then twice, then finally accept with a performance of overwhelming gratitude. $1,000 here, $500 there, a new iPhone so they could have better video quality, small investments for Elias, proof of concept for Rhea. 4 months in, Elias decided to introduce the idea to his daughter, Maya. He met her for lunch at a bistro near her boarding school in Wisconsin. Maya was 16, sharp, cynical, and observant. When Elias showed her a picture of Rhea, Maya didn't smile. She zoomed in on the photo. She's younger than me, Dad, Maya said, sliding the phone back. She's 26, Maya. She's an adult, and she makes me happy. Maya picked at her salad. She lives in the Philippines. You met her at a bar. Do you really think she likes you for your personality? You're never even home. You don't know her, Elias snapped, defensive. She's different. She has traditional values. She respects me. Okay, Dad, Maya said, putting her headphones back on. Whatever you say. Elias left the lunch feeling more isolated than before. His daughter didn't understand. His friends, the few he told, gave him polite nods but exchanged skeptical glances when he wasn't looking. The world was telling him to be careful. But loneliness creates a powerful echo chamber. The only voice that mattered was the one on the other end of the phone, telling him he was wonderful, strong, and loved. By month 6, the digital intimacy wasn't enough. The void in his penthouse was consuming him. He looked at his bank accounts, millions of dollars sitting there, compounding interest serving no one. He looked at his calendar, a bleak stretch of surgeries and empty weekends. He made a decision. He went to Graph on Oak Street. He spent an hour looking at cuts and clarity. He chose a 2.5-carat solitaire diamond, flawless, set in platinum. It cost $48,000. To Elias, it was a symbol of his commitment. To Rhea, it would be the ultimate validation of her business strategy. He didn't tell her he was coming. He wanted it to be a romantic surprise, a scene out of the movies he secretly loved. He cleared his schedule for 2 weeks, calling in favors with other surgeons to cover his rounds. He booked the flight. While Elias was in the air, crossing the Pacific with the ring burning a hole in his carry-on bag, Rhea was in Cebu with a man named Marco, a local boyfriend she had been seeing for 2 years. Marco knew about Elias. In fact, Marco helped her draft some of the English messages when the grammar got too complicated. To them, Elias was the ATM. They joked about how long they could keep him on the hook before he got bored. They didn't know the ATM was flying at 500 miles per hour toward them, ready to close the deal. Elias landed in Manila with a mixture of exhaustion and adrenaline. He took a private car straight to the address she had given him for packages, a modest apartment complex in Quezon City. He texted her from the lobby, "I have a delivery for you. Come downstairs." When Rhea walked out of the elevator and saw Elias standing there with his suitcase and a bouquet of roses, her face went pale. For a split second, the mask slipped. It wasn't joy, it was panic. She wasn't ready. The apartment wasn't staged. Marco might have been nearby. But Rhea was a professional. She blinked, took a breath, and launched herself into his arms, burying her face in his neck so he couldn't see her eyes adjusting to the new reality. "Oh my God," she screamed, playing the part of the overwhelmed lover. "I can't believe you're here." Elias held her tight, smelling her shampoo, feeling the warmth of a human body after months of cold screens. He thought her shaking was excitement. He didn't realize it was the adrenaline of a con artist realizing the stakes had just been raised. The game was no longer remote. The mark was in the room. Elias didn't wait. He couldn't afford to. At 57, patience feels like a luxury you no longer have. 3 days after arriving in Manila, he took Rhea to dinner at the Peak, the highest restaurant in the city. The view was breathtaking, a sprawling carpet of light stretching to the horizon. But Elias wasn't looking at the city. He was looking at Rhea, who was wearing a dress he had bought her the day before at Greenbelt Mall. A $2,000 Valentino that she wore with the casual indifference of someone who felt she deserved it. When the dessert arrived, Elias slid off his chair and onto one knee. The restaurant went silent. He opened the velvet box. The $48,000 solitaire diamond caught the dim mood lighting, sparking like a flare in the dark. "Rhea," Elias said, his voice trembling with a vulnerability that would have terrified him in the operating room. "You've given me a reason to wake up again. I don't want to be alone anymore. I want you to come home with me. Will you be my wife?" Rhea stared at the ring. For a microsecond, she did the math. This wasn't just a ring, it was a visa. It was a penthouse in Chicago. It was a life where she never had to worry about the price of rice or electricity again. The client was offering her a permanent contract. "Yes," she cried out, tears streaming down her face. This time, they were tears of relief. She had won. The next 2 weeks were a blur of bureaucracy and humidity. Elias wanted to get married immediately, right there in the Philippines, to start the immigration paperwork. He hired a fixer to expedite the license, paying triple the standard fees to cut through the red tape. They married in a small civil ceremony in Makati. No family, no friends. Just Elias, Rhea, and a judge who looked bored. It was official, but it wasn't enough. Elias had to return to Chicago to return to his surgical rotation. Rhea had to stay behind to wait for her visa interview and prepare her things. This period of separation was dangerous, but Elias was too high on dopamine to see it. He flew back to the U.S., leaving his new wife with a credit card for emergencies and a monthly allowance of $3,000 to cover her living expenses while she waited. Back in Quezon City, Rhea didn't pack. She liquidated. She sold the appliances in her apartment. She threw a massive party for her friends, funded by Elias's allowance. She broke things off with Marco, giving him a severance package of cash to keep him quiet. She scrubbed her social media, deleting years of history, reinventing herself as the demure, devoted wife of a doctor. She was shedding her skin, preparing to inhabit the new role she had secured. 4 months later, the visa was approved. Rhea arrived at O'Hare International Airport in the dead of winter. She stepped out of the terminal shivering, wrapped in a coat Elias had sent her. When he saw her, he felt a sense of triumph. He had done it. He had secured the companion. He brought her home to the penthouse. "This is... wow," Rhea whispered, walking into the living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the frozen lake. She wasn't acting this time. The scale of his wealth was real. "It's our home now," Elias said, beaming. But Elias had a nagging insecurity. He was a man of procedure, and in his mind the civil ceremony in the Philippines felt distant, almost administrative. He wanted to claim her properly on American soil. He wanted his colleagues, his friends, and the state of Illinois to recognize this union without ambiguity. "We should do it again," Elias told her one night over dinner. "A real wedding, here, for my friends, and to make sure everything is completely official under U.S. law." Rhea hesitated for a moment, stirring her risotto. A second marriage certificate? In the U.S.? She knew enough about international law to know that a U.S. marriage license would make any future legal battles significantly easier for her. It would cement her status not just as a foreign spouse, but as a domestic legal partner. "If that makes you happy, Elias," she said softly, "I just want to be your wife." They married for the second time at the Cook County Courthouse, followed by a lavish dinner at a steakhouse in the Gold Coast. Elias invited 20 people, colleagues, a few golf buddies. They all came, mostly out of curiosity, to see the young woman who had captured the eternal bachelor. Maya, his daughter, didn't come. She sent a text. "Congrats, Dad. Hope it's worth it." Elias ignored the text. He was busy signing the marriage license. He signed his name with a flourish. He didn't have a prenuptial agreement. It wasn't that Elias hadn't tried to get a prenuptial agreement. It was that Rhea had masterfully evaded it. When he first presented the draft, she didn't get angry. She simply played the confused foreigner, claiming the dense legal English was overwhelming and made her feel like a business transaction rather than a bride. When he brought it up again a week later, she pleaded stress, hugging him tightly and asking if they could just focus on their happiness until after the ceremony. On the morning of the wedding, she applied the final stroke. As she adjusted his tie, she smiled and said, "Baby, we're practically married already. Let's just sign the financial papers next week when things calm down." "I'm not going anywhere." Elias, not wanting to ruin the mood, agreed to a post-nup. He didn't know that by pushing the signature past the wedding date, Rhea had effectively neutralized his protection. So he signed the license. The trap was now legally hermetic. The Philippines marriage made her his wife. The U.S. marriage made her a stakeholder in the corporation of Elias Thorne. For the first 3 months, life was idyllic. Rhea played the role perfectly. She cooked or ordered in and plated it nicely. She wore the clothes he liked. She massaged his shoulders when he came home after a 12-hour surgery. The silence in the penthouse was gone, replaced by her music, her laughter, her presence. But slowly, the client phase began to fade, and the partner phase began. "Elias," she said one evening, looking at his laptop screen where he was reviewing his investment portfolio, "why is your money just sitting there? In stocks? That's so boring." "It's safe, Rhea. It's for retirement." "But we could do so much more," she said, walking over and sitting on his lap. "My friend in Manila, her husband invests in real estate, flipping condos. We should buy a property, something we can work on together. I have such a good eye for design. It would give me something to do while you're at the hospital." Elias hesitated. He was conservative with money, but he looked at her, young, bored, eager to build a life with him. He felt guilty that he was at work all day, leaving her alone in a new country. "Maybe," he said. "What did you have in mind?" "Nothing big," she smiled. "Just a small condo downtown, maybe $600,000. I can manage the renovation. It will be our project." "Our project?" That was the first key turning in the lock. Elias agreed. He liquidated some bonds and put the down payment on a luxury condo in the Loop. He put Rhea's name on the deed. "For estate planning purposes," he told himself, "in case something happens to me." He didn't realize he was financing his own exit package. The post-nup conversation never happened. Every time Elias brought it up, Rhea had a counter-move. A romantic weekend getaway, a sudden illness, a tearful conversation about how she felt isolated in America. Eventually, Elias stopped asking. He was tired of being the bad guy in his own marriage. Besides, he had other things to worry about. The condo project in the Loop, their shared hobby, was hemorrhaging money. Rhea, the self-proclaimed designer, had expensive taste. She insisted on Italian marble, smart home systems from Germany, and custom cabinetry. The initial $600,000 purchase price was just the entry fee. The renovation budget, originally set at $100,000, ballooned to $250,000. Elias wrote the checks, but here is where he made the fatal error. To make paying the contractors easier, he added Rhea to his primary checking account, the account where his hospital salary, bonuses, and dividends were deposited. He handed her a debit card with his name on it, but her signature authority. "It's just for the house," she said. "I'll keep track of everything in a spreadsheet." In the eyes of a forensic accountant, this moment is known as commingling. By mixing his premarital income with their marital expenses in a shared account, Elias was slowly erasing the line between his money and their money. He was pouring his separate wealth into a community pot, and once the water is mixed, you can't separate the drops. 6 months into the renovation, Elias's daughter Maya came to visit during her spring break. She walked into the penthouse and immediately noticed the changes. The austere masculine furniture was gone, replaced by trendy beige sectionals. There were shopping bags from Hermes and Van Cleef and Arpels sitting on the dining table, unopened. Dinner was tense. Maya watched Rhea pour a $300 bottle of wine like it was water. "So," Maya said, cutting into her steak, "how's the job search going, Rhea? I thought you were going to look for marketing work once you got settled." Rhea smiled, tight and polite. "I am working, Maya. I'm managing the real estate project. It's a full-time job managing contractors. Your father and I are building a portfolio." "A portfolio?" Maya scoffed. "You mean Dad is buying houses and you're playing Sims with his credit card?" "Maya," Elias snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "That is enough. Apologize." Maya stood up, throwing her napkin down. "She's bleeding you dry, Dad, and you're too busy playing happy family to see it. Look at her wrist. That's a Cartier love bracelet. That's $7,000. Did she manage that into existence? Maya stormed out. Elias didn't chase her. He stayed at the table, apologizing to Ria, soothing her tears. He chose the wife over the daughter, cementing his isolation. Now there was no one left to warn him. As the first year of marriage came to a close, the dynamic shifted again. The condo was finished, but instead of selling it for a profit as planned, Ria suggested they keep it. The market is down, she argued. Let's rent it out. I'll manage the tenant. It will be passive income. Elias agreed. He was tired. The hospital was demanding. And honestly, he liked coming home to a happy wife. But Ria was home less and less. She started taking trips to visit new friends she'd made in the city. A group of other young, glamorous wives of older, wealthy men. They went to Miami for the weekend. They went to New York for Fashion Week. Elias paid for it all. He convinced himself that this was normal. She was young. She needed to have fun. He was the provider. That was his role. But Ria wasn't just partying. She was networking. Specifically, she was networking with divorce attorneys. On a girls' trip to Los Angeles, she didn't go to the beach. She met with a consultant who specialized in high net worth divorces for spouses of professionals. She learned about lifestyle analysis. She learned that if she could prove a certain standard of living was established during the marriage, she could demand alimony to maintain that standard for years after the split. So, she ramped up the spending. Not on things, but on experiences. First-class travel only, private chefs, memberships at exclusive clubs. She was artificially inflating their marital standard of living to set a baseline for future support payments. She was building the data points for her lawsuit. Then came the silence. 18 months after the wedding. Elias came home early on a Tuesday to surprise her. The penthouse was quiet, too quiet. He walked into the bedroom. Her closet, usually overflowing with the clothes he had bought her, was half empty. The jewelry box on the vanity was gone. His stomach dropped. He pulled out his phone and called her. Straight to voicemail. He checked his banking app. The joint checking account, the one he had added her to for convenience, was drained. $140,000 withdrawn in a series of wire transfers over the last 3 days. He frantically clicked over to the savings account. That was still there. But then he saw the pending transaction on his home equity line of credit. $250,000 wired to an account in the Cayman Islands. Elias stood in the middle of his $1.8 million penthouse, the phone slipping from his sweaty hand. He wasn't heartbroken, not yet. In that moment, he was just confused. He thought she had been kidnapped. He thought she was in trouble. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't Ria. It was a process server, a heavy-set man in a windbreaker chewing gum. Dr. Elias Thorne? Yes. You've been served. He handed Elias a thick envelope. Elias opened it with shaking fingers. It wasn't a ransom note. It was a petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed in Cook County. Petitioner, Ria Thorne. Respondent, Elias Thorne. Demands temporary spousal support, $15,000 per month. 50% of marital assets, including the appreciation of his investment portfolio during the marriage. An exclusive use of the Loop condo. And there, buried in the legal jargon, was the kicker. She was accusing him of financial abuse and emotional cruelty, citing his long work hours as neglect and his control over the main investment accounts as coercive control. Elias sat on the floor. The silence of the apartment came rushing back, louder than ever. He had flown 8,000 miles to escape this silence, only to pay millions to have it returned to him. Elias sat across from Marcus Stone, the most expensive divorce attorney in Chicago. Stone's office was glass and mahogany, designed to intimidate. He flipped through the petition Ria had filed, his face unreadable. It's a shakedown, Elias, Stone said, tossing the file onto the desk. But it's a well-executed one. She stole $390,000 from me before she even filed, Elias said, his voice hoarse. Can't we charge her with theft? Stone shook his head. Technically, she didn't steal it. You added her to the account. You gave her signature authority. In the eyes of the law, that money was marital property. She just withdrew her share, and then some. We can try to claw it back during the division of assets, but if it's in a Cayman account, good luck finding it. Then came the hammer blow. Stone pointed to the accusations of financial abuse and coercive control. "This is the real weapon," Stone explained. "She knows you're the chief of surgery. She knows your reputation is your currency. If this goes to open court, these accusations become public record. Even if they are lies, the headline, 'Top Surgeon Accused of Abusing Young Immigrant Wife,' will end your career before the trial even starts. She doesn't want a trial, Elias. She wants you to pay her to go away." The negotiations took 3 months. It was a slow, agonizing bleed. Ria's lawyer, a shark paid for with Elias's own money, argued that Ria had given up her life in the Philippines to support Elias's career and that she had become accustomed to a first-class standard of living. They presented receipts from the trips to Miami, the dinners at Nobu, the designer clothes. Elias had spent money to make her happy. Now that spending was being used as the baseline for her alimony demands. In the end, Elias folded. He couldn't risk the hospital board finding out about the abuse allegations. The settlement was brutal. Ria kept the $390,000 she had wired out. She received a lump sum payment of $1.2 million to waive her claim on his pension and the practice. She was awarded the Loop condo, valued at $650,000 with $200,000 equity, to live in or sell. And Elias had to pay her legal fees, $65,000. Total cost of the relationship, approximately $1.9 million in assets, plus the operating costs of their marriage. The day the divorce was finalized, Elias sat in his penthouse. It was finally silent again. But this wasn't the peaceful silence of success. It was the silence of a tomb. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Maya. "Grandma told me it's over. Can I come see you?" Elias cried. For the first time in 30 years, the surgeon who fixed everyone else broke down. When Maya arrived, she didn't say, "I told you so." She just hugged him. She looked at the empty space on the wall where a piece of art used to hang. Ria had taken that too, and squeezed her father's hand. "It's just money, Dad," she said. "You can make more money, but you need to stop trying to buy people." Elias didn't recover quickly. He kept his job, but the spark was gone. He worked because he had to rebuild his liquidity, not because he loved the glory. He sold the penthouse. It had too many ghosts. He moved into a smaller, serviced apartment closer to the hospital. 6 months later, Elias was sitting in his office between surgeries when an automated email alert popped up on his phone. It was from Zillow. The Loop condo, the one Ria had fought so viciously to keep, crying to the judge that it was her sanctuary, was listed for sale. Elias clicked the link. The photos showed an empty shell. The custom Italian furniture was gone. The art was gone. The listing price was aggressive, priced for a quick cash sale. She hadn't lived there for even a month after the divorce. She had liquidated the asset, packed the cash, and vanished. He closed the browser tab with anger. He finally understood the equation. She didn't want the home. She didn't want the view. She wanted the equity. He hadn't lost a wife. He had just closed a bad business deal. He opened his journal, a habit his therapist had suggested, and wrote down the autopsy of his marriage, a list of warnings for the man he used to be. The lesson: 1. Desperation is blood in the water. Predators do not hunt strength. They hunt the void inside you. If you have to travel halfway across the world to feel like a king, you are not finding love. You are painting a target on your back. The moment you lead with your wallet to fill a lonely heart, you stop being a person and start being an economy. 2. Integration is incineration. Commingling funds, adding names to deeds, or skipping the prenup isn't romance. It is financial suicide. Leverage has an expiration date. The second you say "I do" without legal armor, your assets stop being yours. In the eyes of the law, ours simply means hers. 3. Reputation is the ransom. Elias thought the truth would protect him. He was wrong. Predators know that for a high-status man, a reputation takes a lifetime to build and one headline to destroy. They don't need to win a trial. They just need to threaten your legacy. The settlement wasn't for the divorce. It was hush money. 4. The skeptic's veto. When your inner circle, especially your children, rejects your new partner, it is not jealousy. It is objective pattern recognition. You are intoxicated by the validation. They are soberly watching the robbery in progress. If the people who love you for you don't trust her, show her the door. 5. The invoice always arrives. The most dangerous things in life are the ones that feel free, the sudden adoration, the heavy compliments, the perfect compliance. But if the affection feels transactional, it is because you are the customer, not the husband. You just haven't received the bill yet. Dr. Elias Thorne is still a surgeon. He is still rich but broken. He eats his dinner alone, and his passport stays in the drawer. He learned that in surgery, a mistake costs blood. In love, a mistake costs everything else. Thanks for watching this episode of Broken Rich. If you found value in Elias's story, hit the like button and subscribe. Don't let loneliness be the reason you lose your empire. Stay sharp, stay protected.